Hello everyone, my name is Dogly, and over the past week I've been having so much fun playing as our favorite hedgehog, ninja, swirling behemoth, Sayu. And she's been just so much fun to play as. I think that as a character, while she has great support capabilities, I feel like those capabilities are ingrained in her kit, ingrained in just her healing amount, and I feel like you don't need to really build her in any specific way to increase her support capabilities to any meaningful level. Instead, though, I think really focusing on getting high damage can be a great way to improve your Sayu build overall. So in this video, I'm going to be comparing three different more of sub DPS slash main DPS builds for your Sayu so that you can really maximize her damage output while using her hold elemental skill. I think her normal skills, her normal attacks really don't hit very hard, so again this video is focusing on her hold elemental skill as a sub DPS and main DPS. So this first build that you can just see on screen right now is more of an attack and crit build, a standard sub DPS, main DPS build. Up next here is focusing more on elemental skill, or on elemental mastery, excuse me. So here I'm just going to be swapping out a few artifacts to get more elemental mastery, and I'm also going to be swapping out my weapon as well. Do keep in mind that the weapon that I'm using here is not fully leveled. It does have some elemental mastery main stat, but because it's not a fully leveled weapon, some of the damage output that you'll see in a little bit on the upcoming chart won't be its true maximum capacity for an elemental mastery build. My elemental mastery build has 884 elemental mastery, so pretty high up there. Then the last build will be then a mixed build. So I believe this one will end up around 550 elemental mastery, and then still keeping some decent amount of attack and crit damage. In comparing these three different builds, I went to Masonori and really wanted to record the footage and slow it down and be able to really see all of these numbers. And I think this is kind of a really cool tool that we received in Inazuma, just being able to fight Masonori whenever we want. So I've had some fun trying to just record the damage, really see everything. I do want to say that when you're using Sayu on your screen, the font size of your swirl damage is so small that it's so easy to miss. So even if you feel like you're not seeing your swirl damage on screen, it is there. I slowed down my footage and was able to find it and really see it. So in this chart, I'm really then recording all of the numbers that I'm seeing. I could kind of slow down the footage in some parts to really show you these numbers, but I really feel like to make sure the video goes as smoothly as possible, just kind of showing you the data that I got is more important. So you can see here in this top section, the top third of this chart, what I'm really doing is just recording all of the damage outputs that I'm seeing from all of these three different sets. You'll notice, like in some spots, I say the buff ran out of time because that's when I'm using Bennett's buff at the beginning, and then Sayu's Sayu's rolling afterwards. Bennett's buff lasts for about 10 seconds, and Sayu's rolling lasts for about 10 seconds. So if you're using Bennett dropping his elemental burst and then switching to Sayu, you are losing a little bit of time there. So if you did want her elemental kick and her animo kick to be boosted by Bennett's buff, then I really think that making sure that you're not going the full 10 seconds in Sayu's elemental skill can really increase that kick damage, but I really would only recommend that for her attack and crit build and then for her mixed build. For her elemental mastery build, you can see that the kick damage is not a significant portion of her damage output, and really staying in hedgehog mode for as long as possible and getting the extra swirls is important. In the middle section, I'm then kind of adding all of those numbers together, calculating them, seeing what the total damage is for each of these builds against a single target, like a Masonori. So I tried to calculate how many swirls Sayu's elemental skill can do, and I ended up with 8 swirls. So 6 of them are during the in-between period when she's actually using elemental skill rolling around. One happens upon activating the skill, and then another happens during the kick at the end of the skill. So you have 6 swirls during the duration, and then 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end. I then also tried to calculate how many rolls her animal roll damage does, and how many times her additional elemental damage does in that state as well, and I got about 15 for each. They trigger at the same time. I would say, depending on how fast you roll around or what your rolling pattern is, this number can vary greatly. I would say anywhere between 10 to 15 is normal. If you had 2 completely static enemies that were right next to each other, you might be able to get 16 or 17 rolls while in the 10-second duration of her elemental skill. But really, I think 10 to 15 is more likely, and then I calculated this at 15 rolls. You can see at the top of the middle section, I'm saying that for her attack and crit build, I'm calculating it as a 50% crit rate, and then her elemental mastery build 20% crit rate, and her mixed build again 50% crit rate. So that's then how I'm getting these numbers. So total swirls is just the swirl damage itself multiplied by 8, whereas animal roll damage would be her animal roll damage no crit times 7.5 plus her animal roll damage crit times 7.5. So that's then where we get that 41,000 and so forth. We can see then that the total damage for a DPS build or an attack/crit build for Sayu ends up being 109,000 damage based off of my current artifacts and so forth. For the elemental mastery build, this is around 72,000, and then 99,000 for a mixed build. So you can see that the mixed build is about in between the two, but a little bit closer to the upper end. It's above an average between the two. And then that last third on the chart, I am analyzing damage against multiple enemies. So this is the quad swirl. So if you have 2 enemies and you're swirling elemental reactions onto each other, you can get up to 4 swirls and so forth. So here we can see dramatic changes in between the damage output, because once you add more swirls into the mix, of course the elemental mastery damage is going to go way up. You're going to get a lot more damage from all of those swirls. So we can see here the best build against multiple enemies is the swirl build, dealing about 228,000 damage, and then the DPS build does about 180,000 damage, and then mixed build about 221,000 damage. So mixed build is surprisingly close to the elemental mastery build. Do keep in mind that, again, if you wanted to maximize the mixed damage build, you would be ending your elemental hold a little bit sooner to increase the power of your kick, so that it benefits from Bennett's buff, so that would up it a little bit further as well. And my elemental mastery build could have increased damage with by leveling up my weapon, because again, my weapon on this build is not fully leveled, so the damage could still be increased a bit through that. But overall, I'm really kind of impressed with how the mixed damage results were. While again, against multiple enemies, the elemental mastery build is the best for sure, and against a single target, the attack and crit build is the best for sure. But when you're going into places like the Abyss, where chambers keep changing between how many enemies are spawned at a given time, you might have, within a single chamber, you might start with 1 rune guard, and then you might have 3 mechanical enemies spawning after the 1 rune guard is dead. So because of things like that, the Abyss really kind of pivots you between having single targets and multi-targets. And I think a mixed build actually does the best of both worlds, or almost the best of both worlds, and the best overall damage. So I really think that a Sayu mixed build might be your best bet for the long haul, because the Abyss cycle has been like this forever, really kind of having a focus between multiple enemies and single enemies. You're always going to fight some stages that have multiple enemies, and you're always going to fight some stages that just have one, or some stages that have a few, but the two smaller enemies or whatever die super fast, and then you're left with one big enemy that'll take forever to, that will take the majority of your time to defeat. So because of that, I really, really encourage you guys to try out a mixed build for your Sayu and see what works best for you. Again, all of these numbers on the chart that I had in this video are just focusing on my builds and my artifacts, so your individual damage output is going to be very different depending on what weapon and artifacts you use and so forth. In this video, on the mixed builds and attack and crit builds, I was actually using Prototype Archaic, but in actual gameplay, I myself personally use the Serpent Spine on Sayu just for that extra crit damage and for the awesome effects that you get. I think if you are going an attack and crit build or a mixed build, I do think Wolf's Gravestone is probably the best in slot Claymore for her, but I do think Serpent Spine, Prototype Archaic are decent replacements as well. Thanks guys so much for watching, and if you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know. If you guys want to see my Sayu mixed build in action in the Abyss, you can check out my next video, which I'm posting at the same time as this one. Also, please comment down below what Sayu builds you've been having success with. I definitely love to hear from all of you. And again, I think that a mixed build is really, really strong, and I've been using mixed build on Kazuha as well. And I think that people are really underestimating the potential for a mixed build, and I hope that my chart here can kind of show you why a mixed build can be great when you have different numbers of enemies that you're fighting within a single Abyss cycle.